The world of Veltara was known for its calm skies. Every morning, the twin suns rose in quiet harmony, spreading gold and silver light across the white towers of the Tyrax dominion. The Tyrax people were proud, elegant, and powerful. For thousands of years, no enemy had dared to challenge them. They ruled 300 star systems, and their fleets patrolled the edges of known space like silent gods. But on this morning, the sky betrayed them. High above the capital city of Serath Prime, a strange pulse echoed through the heavens, a deep vibration that rattled glass and bone alike. The first to notice were the watch officers stationed in the Orbital Defense Command Tower. They were used to silence. Today, their screens flickered with light. "Multiple warp signatures!" shouted a young operator, his crest feathers rising in alarm. "Origin unknown, coordinates shifting, there's too many to count." Admiral Terran Voss, commander of the Tyrax Defense Network, leaned over the console. He stared at the sensor data, his black eyes narrowing. "That must be an error," he said calmly. "No fleet can move like that. Check again." But the operator's voice shook. "Sir, it's not an error. The count just passed 5,000. 6,000. Voss froze. The room fell silent except for the hum of machines. Then, one by one, the defense officers turned toward the window that faced the upper atmosphere. The blue morning sky was no longer blue. It had turned gray, metallic gray. A shadow spread across the horizon as enormous ships slid out of warp space, their hulls dark and angular. Thousands of them, each the size of a small moon, formed a wall across the heavens. They moved with mechanical grace, forming perfect lines and rows, as if an unseen hand directed them all at once. Someone whispered, "By the stars!" "Who are they?" A low vibration shook the city as the ships arranged themselves above the planet. Sunlight flashed across their surfaces, revealing an unfamiliar emblem, a blue circle with a single white star at its center. The symbol burned like a brand in the sky. "It's impossible," said Voss quietly. "That mark, no one uses that anymore." A communications officer turned in confusion. "Sir?" Voss didn't answer. He remembered stories from the academy, old myths told by ancient scholars. Stories about a species that once ruled the stars with fury and courage, a species that vanished 10,000 years ago. The humans. The Tyrax had laughed at the idea. Humans were bedtime stories, nothing more. Primitive creatures who burned too bright and too fast before destroying themselves. The galaxy had moved on without them, or so everyone thought. Now, as 10,000 human warships covered the sky, those old stories didn't feel like myths anymore. The defense network came alive. Sirens wailed through the capital. Squadrons of Silver Tyrax fighters launched from hidden platforms, streaking toward the alien fleet. Ground cannons rotated upward, locking onto targets that blotted out the sun. "Send a hail," Voss ordered. "Identify them. Demand their purpose here." The officer obeyed. Seconds passed. No response. Only static. "Try again," Voss said. Still nothing. The silence from the enemy was worse than any threat. It felt deliberate. Then, without warning, the human ships began to move. The front ranks opened like the jaws of a beast, revealing thousands of smaller craft, sleek black vessels shaped like arrows. They glided forward in eerie silence, engines glowing blue. One of the junior officers shouted, "They're scanning us! Every system, every channel, they're reading our entire defense grid." Voss gritted his teeth. "Block them! Raise countermeasures!" But the human signal was too strong. It passed through every firewall, every code, every secret barrier the Tyrax had built. Within seconds, the humans knew everything. Every ship, every weapon, every weakness. The first blast came without warning. A beam of pure energy cut through the atmosphere, slicing across the outer orbital ring. 1,000 Tyrax defense ships vanished in a single flash. "Return fire!" Voss roared. The sky turned white as hundreds of plasma bolts shot upward from the planet. They struck the enemy fleet and disappeared like raindrops on steel. The human shields absorbed everything. Another blast answered, then another. One after another, human weapons fell like lightning, striking orbital platforms, space stations, and fleets that had never known defeat. The Tyrax defenders screamed through the radio channels. "We can't break through. Their power levels, impossible." "Who are they?" Voss could barely speak. He stared at the largest ship in orbit, a black triangle wider than the moon itself. At its center, The same white star symbol burned bright. He whispered the words that would soon echo across the galaxy. It's them. The lost ones. The humans. On the surface below, the citizens of Serath Prime poured into the streets, staring at the burning sky. Some prayed. Others ran. Many simply watched in silence as the heavens filled with fire. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Tirax Dominion felt fear. In the command tower, Voss turned to his officers. "Send word to the High Council," he said. "Tell them the legends were true." "But what should we tell them beyond that, sir?" asked his aide. Voss looked again at the sky, where the human ships formed a ring of light around the planet. "Tell them," he said softly, "that the gods of war have returned." Outside, thunder rolled, not from storms, but from the sound of engines older than the Dominion itself. The air shimmered with energy. From the dark edge of the sky, a deep voice spoke through every channel, every speaker, every mind. "This is Admiral Sloan of the United Terran Fleet," it said. "You took what was ours. We're taking it back." And just like that, the myth became reality. The sky of Veltara turned to fire. Long before the skies of Veltara turned to fire, there had been whispers. Ancient stories passed through the galaxy, told in bars, temples, and academies. Every species had their own version, but the ending was always the same. The humans vanished. The Galactic Council, which had ruled for 8,000 years, called the story a fable. The human empire never existed, they taught their young. They were a primitive species that burned themselves out before the dawn of spaceflight. And most believed it. After all, there was no proof, no ruins, no ships, no survivors. Just a few strange relics found on dead moons, marked with that simple blue and white star. But deep in the forgotten corners of the galaxy, not everyone laughed. Among the scholars of the Varan archives, an old historian named Lurak Ten had spent his life chasing the truth. He was mocked for it. They called him the human dreamer, yet he refused to stop. He collected every story, every clue, traces of an empire that had once risen faster than any other. The legend said humans came from a small blue planet near a yellow sun. They called it Earth. The Tirax had long wiped that system from their maps after one of their early wars, claiming it was barren. But Lurak had seen the scans himself. There were ruins there, buried under the dust. Humans, it was said, had been strange even by galactic standards. They were short-lived, but burned with unmatched drive. They built ships faster, fought harder, and adapted to any world. Where others saw danger, humans saw challenge. Where others built slowly, humans forged. The story told that the Council had first welcomed them. Humanity's energy and creativity lifted dozens of weaker species. Trade grew, technology spread, and hope bloomed across the stars. But soon, fear followed. Humans advanced too quickly. They refused to obey the Council's strict laws. They spread into forbidden regions, built weapons no one else dared to imagine, and refused to kneel before anyone. When the Council tried to control them, humans fought back. That was called the Century of Fire. The skies across the core worlds burned for 100 years. Entire fleets vanished. Entire planets turned to ash. No one really knew how many died. But the Council finally claimed victory when the human colonies went dark. Their worlds were left silent. Some said the humans destroyed themselves with their own power. Others believed they fled, vanished into dark space. Beyond the edge of all charts, for 10,000 years, that was where the story ended. Until now, on the command world of the Tirax Dominion, the High Council met in their silver chamber as Admiral Voss's message reached them. They listened in silence as his final words echoed. "The gods of war have returned." The chamber was quiet. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. Counselor Marath Kai, a sharp-eyed strategist, spoke first. "That symbol cannot be coincidence. The blue circle, the white star. Every culture that remembers the human myth describes it exactly so." Another counselor hissed, "Myths do not command fleets of 10,000 ships." Marath replied coldly, "Then they are not myths anymore." Outside the council chamber, panic spread through the Dominion systems. Civilian transports fled their worlds, clogging hyperspace lanes. Merchant guilds sent desperate messages to their allies. Every empire within 10 sectors scrambled to raise defenses. But deep down, everyone knew. There was no defense against what was coming. Meanwhile, far across the black, in the human flagship Vanguard of Sol, Admiral Sloane stood before a holographic map of the galaxy. The pale light reflected off her scarred face. Around her, officers spoke in calm voices, reading data, updating battle paths. No shouting, no chaos, only focus. Sloane had been raised on the stories, the ones that began with loss. Humanity had not died, it had left. Humanity had not died, it had left. When the old Earth governments fell, the survivors gathered under one flag, the United Terran Fleet. They refused to submit to alien powers who saw them as tools and slaves. They had taken their ships, their knowledge, and gone into exile. For 10,000 years they lived in the dark regions of space, beyond the rim, where light itself faded. They had built cities among dead stars and mined black holes for power. They had learned patience. They had not forgotten. Sloane's voice was low as she gave orders. Fleet Alpha will secure the outer orbit. Fleet Beta will disable planetary defenses without civilian casualties. No uncontrolled bombardments. We came here for justice, not destruction. Her second-in-command nodded. Understood, Admiral. Do we broadcast our declaration? Sloane looked out at the stars. Not yet. Let them see us first. Let them remember why they feared us. Back on Veltara, the Tyrax skies still glowed faintly red from the battle above. In the ruins of a shattered observatory, a young Tyrax cadet named Raylan crouched beside his wounded commander. He looked up through the broken dome at the vast ships floating like mountains in the upper atmosphere. Sir, he whispered, why are they doing this? Why come back after all this time? The old commander coughed, blood staining his scales. Because, boy, we made them what they are. He pointed weakly toward the heavens. When the council hunted them long ago, we joined in. We thought we were wiping out a danger, but perhaps the danger was not their power. Perhaps it was what we feared inside ourselves, the will to fight for freedom. Raylan looked up again. The human ships moved slowly now, forming new patterns, glowing faint blue against the night. In that moment, even through his fear, he felt something strange. Respect. Far above, aboard the Vanguard, Admiral Sloane watched the sensors. The Tyrax fleet was broken, their communications silent. Her officers awaited the next command. Sloane whispered to herself, words spoken only to the ghosts of the past. 10,000 years in the dark. And they still think we're myths, she raised her hand. Then let's remind them who we are. The stars outside pulsed with light as the human fleet moved again. Slow, deliberate, unstoppable. The age of myth was over. The age of humanity had returned. Above the burning skies of Veltara, the United Terran Fleet moved like a living storm. 10,000 ships, each one a fortress of steel and light, hung in perfect formation. From the surface, they looked like a ceiling of stars that had forgotten their place in the heavens. Admiral Sloane stood on the bridge of the Vanguard of Sol, her eyes fixed on the planet below. The Tyrax capital was still burning, but her expression was calm. Status? She asked. Her second officer replied, Enemy defenses are down. Orbital resistance is minimal. No response from their ground command? Good, Sloane said. Then we moved to Phase 2. Her voice echoed through the command deck. Dozens of officers moved at once, coordinated, disciplined, silent. No one celebrated. They weren't here for victory. They were here for a reckoning. Down below in the half-ruined defense tower of Sarath Prime, Admiral Voss watched the same sky through smoke-stained glass. The Tyrax Dominion had fought countless wars. They had crushed rebellions, broken fleets, conquered worlds. Yet nothing had ever felt like this. These humans didn't fight like any known species. They didn't broadcast threats or boast of glory. They simply acted, with precision, with purpose, with a coldness that spoke of millennia of preparation. Open communications again, Voss said. "We must talk to them." His officers obeyed, sending out broadband messages of peace and surrender. Static answered, then finally a sound, a single brief tone. A channel opened. Voss stepped forward. "This is Admiral Voss of the Tyrax Dominion. Identify yourself and state your purpose." There was silence. Then a calm voice replied, smooth and human. "This is Admiral Sloane of the United Terran Fleet." Voss's throat tightened. "Human? You can't be real." "Oh, we're real," Sloane said. "You should remember, your ancestors tried to erase us." Voss felt the room grow colder. "That was a different age. We are not those who fought your kind." "Maybe not," Sloane said. "But you live under the empire they built on our graves." Voss swallowed. "What do you want?" Sloane's tone never changed. "We came for truth, for justice, and for what you took from us." Then the transmission cut off. Back aboard the Vanguard, Sloane turned to her officers. "Prepare descent craft. We're sending a delegation to the surface." Her crew looked uneasy. "Ma'am, the Tyrax may try to capture them." Sloane gave a faint smile. "They won't. They know better." Outside, hundreds of dark dropships detached from the fleet, descending through the clouds like silent meteors. In Sarath Prime's central plaza, crowds of Tyrax citizens gathered in fear and awe. The sky was red, the air humming with strange energy. Then, through the thick clouds, the human ships appeared. They didn't roar or burn. They floated. Black metal giants, smooth and cold, lowering themselves with soft pulses of light. The Tyrax watched as ramps extended and figures emerged. The humans wore gray armor, simple, functional, and without decoration. Their helmets reflected the firelight, hiding their faces. But what struck everyone most was their stillness. No panic, no pride, just quiet control. The leader stepped forward, a woman of average height, her face uncovered, eyes steady. Commander Mara Juno, Sloane's envoy. The Tyrax guards aimed their weapons, but no human reacted. Juno simply looked at them, then said, "We are not here to destroy you. We are here to make you remember." The Tyrax captain in charge, young, nervous, stepped forward. "Remember what?" Juno's voice was calm. "Your history, the one you buried." Meanwhile, across the Dominion's communication networks, a signal spread. A message carried by the humans into every major city, every data hub. It was not a threat. It was a recording. Old images flickered to life across Tyrax holoscreens, grainy videos of humans from the ancient wars. Soldiers in ragged armor carrying banners marked with that same blue and white star. Voices spoke in forgotten languages, translated automatically. "We are the children of Earth. You called us savages. You took our worlds, but we endured." Another voice, older, said, "You thought extinction would silence us, but we learned to live where light does not reach." Then, image after image, burned cities, dead colonies, and alien fleets hovering over human worlds. The Tyrax saw themselves among those invaders, their ancestors. For the first time, they saw what their history books never told them. Admiral Voss watched the footage in silence. Around him, his officers whispered in disbelief. "This can't be true. We were told the humans started that war." Voss's face was pale. "We were told many things." He turned away from the screens. The truth hit him harder than any weapon. Back aboard the Vanguard, Sloane received the confirmation. The message had reached every world in the Tyrax Dominion. Her communications officer asked, "Do we proceed with the next phase?" Sloane nodded slowly. "Yes, they've seen what we wanted them to see. Now they'll understand why we're here." Her eyes hardened. But understanding doesn't erase guilt. She looked toward the stars, where hundreds of other alien empires still waited, watching, wondering if the myths were true. "They will all remember," she whispered. On the surface, the human envoy stood before the Tyrax leaders as the last echoes of the ancient recordings faded. "You thought we were gone," Juno said. "You built your power on lies and silence. But you can't bury the truth forever." Her voice carried across the plaza. "We are humanity, and this is our first contact. Again." The crowd was silent. Even the wind seemed to stop. Then, for the first time in 10,000 years, the Tyrax bowed their heads. Above them, the human fleet remained still, like judgment itself waiting in the sky. The silence before the second strike was worse than the battle itself. Above Veltara, the United Terran fleet held position like a wall of light. 10,000 ships floated in precise formation, motionless, patient, almost calm. They looked less like a fleet and more like an idea given form, an idea made of vengeance, discipline, and memory. Inside the flagship Vanguard of Sol, Admiral Sloane stood before a panoramic window, her hands clasped behind her back. The Tyrax fleet hung below them. Millions of soldiers, thousands of warships, and one proud empire that had ruled for ages. "They're preparing another defense wave," said her tactical officer. "Their reinforcements are coming from the moons of Veltara." "Heavy dreadnoughts, shield carriers, fighter swarms?" Sloane nodded. "Let them come." Her tone was steady, her expression unreadable. Around her, the bridge glowed with blue light, the hum of systems filling the quiet like a heartbeat. "Deploy the Aegis line," she ordered. "All ships hold position." "No advance yet," her officers obeyed instantly. 10,000 warships adjusted their formation, turning the fleet into a single unbroken wall. The Tyrax could see it from their capital below, a horizon of metal stretching across the heavens. On the planet's surface, Admiral Voss watched from the defense tower. He was surrounded by chaos, reports of failing shields, burning cities, broken fleets, but his mind clung to one thought. "We cannot lose here. Send everything we have," he commanded. "Orbital batteries, planetary railguns, all remaining squadrons. We drive them out or we die here. Sir, their technology..." "Drive them out or we die here. Sir, their technology..." "I said everything." The sky above Veltara came alive with color. Thousands of Tyrax warships surged upward, their drives glowing red and gold. Plasma fire lit the clouds. From orbit, the human ships seemed to shimmer in response, their hulls turning black to absorb incoming energy. The first Tyrax volley hit. Planetary railguns fired enormous tungsten rounds, each the size of a tower. The shells struck human shields with flashes bright enough to blind satellites. Then came the response. The human fleet didn't fire beams or plasma. Instead, they dropped rods, simple, silent cylinders of dense alloy. They fell at near light speed, guided by gravitational targeting systems. From the surface, they looked like shooting stars. When the first one hit, the ground shook across half the continent. A white flash consumed the horizon, followed by a sound like the world itself breaking apart. Shockwaves tore through mountain ranges. Tyrax defenses melted in an instant. Every soldier watching the sky realized the truth. The humans were not fighting with exotic technology or magic weapons. They were using physics, raw, merciless force shaped by mastery. They weren't gods. They were engineers of destruction. From the bridge of the Vanguard, Sloane watched the Tyrax counteroffensive crumble. "Hold fire," she said. "No unnecessary strikes." Her second-in-command frowned. "We could finish them in minutes," Sloane shook her head. "We didn't come to end them. We came to show them." The Tyrax didn't understand mercy, not yet, but they would. Down below, Admiral Voss's command tower shook as debris rained from the upper atmosphere. His aides shouted reports, communications lost, fleets shattered, ground shields gone. Still, Voss stood firm. "We fight to the last ship," he said. "We cannot let the myths win." But deep inside, he already knew they had. He looked to the sky once more, and through the smoke he saw a strange sight. Human ships were moving again, but not forward. They were repositioning, forming a spiral above the planet, each ship glowing with a faint blue light. "What are they doing?" one of his officers whispered. Voss didn't know. Then the light grew brighter. Lines of energy spread between the ships, linking them like threads in a web. Suddenly, every Tyrax communication channel filled with a single, unified broadcast. A voice carried across the planet. "Smooth and powerful. This world has seen enough blood," Admiral Sloane said. "We have no wish to burn it further. But let this moment be remembered. The era of silence is over. Humanity has returned." All across Veltara, civilians stopped in the streets. Soldiers lowered their weapons. Even the battle-hardened Tyrax officers froze. For the first time in living memory, the mighty Dominion had no words. Then, Without warning, one Tyrax captain, desperate, furious, ignored the command to stand down. His fleet, hidden behind one of the moons, opened fire on the humans with everything they had. The beams lit the void. On the vanguard, alarms flared. Sloane turned sharply. Counter-strike! Minimum yield! A single Terran ship broke formation and fired once. A streak of blue fire crossed the black. Then silence. The Tyrax fleet, 50 ships strong, vanished in a flash of white light. Not destroyed. Erased, Sloane said quietly. Mercy has its limits. When the smoke cleared, the Tyrax survivors sent a signal of surrender. No more weapons fired. The planet's defenses went dark. From orbit, the humans watched, but made no move to land or occupy. Instead, Sloane's voice returned over open channels. You are witnesses now. Tell the galaxy what you saw. Tell them the myths are true. The human fleet began to rise, slowly, majestically, like a storm lifting from a dying sea. The light from their engines cast shadows across the planet's burned plains. Admiral Voss watched them go. His world was broken, his fleets gone, but his mind was filled not with hatred, but with awe. They could have ended us, he whispered. But they didn't. His aide asked softly, Why spare us? Voss looked up at the fading blue light of the departing ships. Because extinction was never their goal, he said. It was remembrance. Above Veltara, the stars shone brighter than before, reflected by 10,000 ships vanishing into the dark, carrying with them the silent promise of a species that had never truly died. The battle above Veltara was over, but the age of humanity had only just begun. The galaxy trembled, not from weapons, but from whispers. Across every channel, from trade relays to pirate frequencies, a single message spread. The humans have returned. Empires froze mid-battle. Smugglers stopped their runs. Scholars reopened dusty archives that had been sealed for ages. For 10,000 years, humanity had been a story told to children, a warning that pride leads to ruin. Now, those same stories were waking up, one by one. In the grand hall of the Terran archives, old historian Lurak 10 stared at the glowing hollow screens. He had devoted his life to studying myths, and now the greatest one had come true before his eyes. He replayed the human broadcast for the 100th time. The calm voice, the blue and white symbol, the fire raining from the skies of Veltara. They didn't return as conquerors, he whispered to himself. They returned as witnesses. He turned to his apprentice, a young Felorian with wide golden eyes. Record this day, Lurak said softly. For history just blinked. Meanwhile, deep within the core systems of the human fleet, far beyond the line of alien sensors, a planet waited in the dark. It was called Eidolon, a world built inside the husk of a dead star. Its oceans were black as glass, its skies filled with the light of captured suns. It was here, in silence, that humanity had rebuilt itself. They had lived in the void others feared. They had mined asteroids made of ice and iron. They had evolved, not through mutation, but through will. Eidolon's people were not conquerors or saints. They were the survivors of extinction. Inside the Hall of Memory on Eidolon, the Council of the Terran fleet gathered. Massive stone walls bore the engraved names of billions, the lost of Earth, Mars, Luna, and the outer colonies. Admiral Sloane entered, her gray uniform streaked with dust from the campaign. She bowed her head briefly before taking her seat. The council leader, Chancellor Eamon Holt, spoke first. His voice was deep, weary, and filled with purpose. You've done well, Admiral. Veltara has surrendered. The message is spreading, Sloane nodded. They've seen what we wanted them to see. The myths are alive again. Good, Holt said. Then the next phase begins. The room grew quiet. Holograms flickered to life above the table, maps of alien space, zones of control, and markers showing ancient human colonies long erased from official records. These worlds were ours once, Holt said. Before the purge. Before the council decided that humans were too dangerous to exist. He pointed to one mark, glowing bright blue. This was Erebus Prime, the last stronghold. The Tyrax burned it to the core, but our probes found something there. Something the galaxy must never know existed. Sloane frowned. You're speaking of the archive. Holt nodded. Yes, the last voice of old Earth. If the Dominion reaches it first, they'll twist it into propaganda. We must recover it. Back in Tyrax space, panic spread through the Dominion's upper ranks. Entire sectors broke away, declaring independence or neutrality. Civilian riots shook the capital. The once proud empire was now choking on fear. In a dim conference room beneath the burned capital of Veltara, Admiral Voss met secretly with his few remaining officers. We need to understand them, he said. These humans, they fight like machines but speak like priests. They could have destroyed us, but they didn't. Why? One officer snarled. Maybe they want us afraid. Voss shook his head. No, fear was never their goal. They wanted us to see something, a reminder, a truth. He looked at the sky through the broken ceiling, where faint blue trails still lingered. They want us to remember who they are and what we did. Aboard the Vanguard, Admiral Sloane stood alone in her quarters, watching old recordings. Her screen showed a piece of history so ancient it barely held color. A human child playing on a green field beneath a blue sky. Earth. The image flickered, and the sound of laughter filled the room. A voice behind her said, "You still watch it." Sloane didn't turn. Every day, her second-in-command, Captain Ryan Coe, stepped closer. "Do you think we'll ever find it?" "Earth," she said. "Maybe. Or maybe it doesn't matter anymore. We carry it with us." She paused, her eyes reflecting the light of the old world. "But I'll tell you what matters. The Council erased us. The galaxy forgot us. Now, every race that cheered our extinction will have to look up and see our flag again." Ryan smiled faintly. "And what then?" Sloane's expression hardened. "Then we'll ask them a question." Far away in the outer rim of known space, a faint signal pulsed from a derelict world, a sound no one had heard in 10,000 years. It was an old human transmission, buried under layers of static. A voice, tired but proud, whispered, "If we are gone, then remember this. Humanity never dies." It waits. The signal reached the fleet. It reached Admiral Sloane, and when she heard it, her heart tightened. "Erebus Prime," she said quietly. "It's calling us home." The stars outside shifted as the Terran fleet changed course. Engines flared, bending light itself as the 10,000-strong armada turned toward the far edge of the galaxy, toward the ashes of their last stand. Across alien worlds, leaders watched in silence. None dared to interfere because every empire, every ruler, every race now understood the same thing. The humans weren't here for conquest. They were here for truth, and truth could burn brighter than any sun. Truth could burn brighter than any sun. The war was over, but the echoes had only begun. Across the stars, the name humanity spread faster than light. From the ice moons of Nerith to the floating cities of the Vor Dominion, every transmission carried the same 3 words. They are back. No empire slept. No ruler dared to breathe too loudly. And on Veltara, the world that had once been the heart of the Tyrax Dominion, the fires still burned. Admiral Voss stood on the balcony of the ruined command tower. The once shining city of Serath Prime lay in ruins below him, a jagged forest of smoke and silence. His fleet was gone. His armies had surrendered, and yet no human boot had touched his world since the battle ended. The Tyrax had expected conquerors to march through their streets. Instead, the human fleet hung motionless in the sky, as if watching, waiting. They didn't broadcast threats. They didn't demand tribute. They only sent a single cryptic message: prepare your leaders. The reckoning will be spoken, not fought. 3 days later, they arrived. The sky above the capital split open as 12 envoy ships descended from orbit, trailing blue light like falling stars. They landed without sound, their hulls shimmering with strange symbols that no Tyrax scholar could read. From the lead vessel stepped a single woman, Commander Mara Juno, the same envoy who had first walked the Tyrax streets after the invasion. Her armor was dark gray, plain, and unmarked. No medals, no flags, Only a small patch on her shoulder bore the blue circle and white star. Behind her came 6 human guards, silent as shadows. Tyrak soldiers surrounded the landing zone, weapons drawn, but none dared to fire. The humans walked forward without fear, their eyes calm, their steps measured. Inside the Hall of Dominion, the surviving counselors gathered in trembling silence. Gold pillars that once gleamed with pride were now cracked and blackened by fire. When the humans entered, even the air seemed to hold its breath. Commander Juno stepped into the center of the hall. She carried no weapon, no translator device, no guard between her and the enemy. Admiral Voss bowed his head slightly, an old soldier's sign of respect. "You have our surrender," he said, "but we do not understand what you want from us." Juno studied him quietly before speaking. "You think surrender is the end?" she said. "But it's only the beginning." Voss frowned. "You could have wiped us out." "Why didn't you?" Juno's gaze was steady. "Because extinction is easy. Memory is harder." She gestured to one of her aides. A small sphere floated into the air, projecting images around the hall, scenes of ancient battles, forgotten archives, and hollow footage from 10,000 years ago. The Tyrak's counselors gasped as they saw their own ancestors standing over human prisoners, forcing them into labor camps, burning cities, erasing records. "Your dominion was built on their bones," Juno said softly. "You buried the truth, but we never forgot. We waited in the dark, rebuilding, not to destroy, but to remind." One of the counselors slammed his fist on the table. "This is manipulation. You show us ancient crimes, but those were not us. We are not the monsters of the past." Juno's eyes softened. "Then prove it." The room fell silent. She stepped closer, her voice quiet but sharp as a blade. "You can't change what your ancestors did, but you can decide what happens next. The galaxy will look to you, the first empire to face us and live. What story will you tell them? That humans are demons? Or that you faced your own history and chose to be better?" Voss looked down at his trembling hands. He had fought his whole life believing the Tyraks were the galaxy's pinnacle of order and honor. Now that foundation had crumbled. He lifted his head slowly. "If we accept your truth, what then?" Juno smiled faintly. "Then we rebuild. Together." Hours passed as the two delegations spoke, not of peace treaties or tribute, but of understanding. The humans offered aid to repair what was lost, but on one condition. Every Tyrak's world must open its archives, uncover its hidden history, and let the truth be seen by all. Voss hesitated. "If we do this, the Dominion will fracture." "It already has," Juno said. "But from ruin comes clarity." She turned to leave but paused at the doorway. "Admiral Voss, one more thing. When you speak to your people, tell them this. Humanity is not their enemy, but we will never again be their slaves." When the humans departed, the Tyrak's council sat in stunned silence. One elder whispered, "She spoke like no conqueror I've ever known." Voss nodded slowly. "That's because they aren't conquerors. They're survivors teaching us what it means to survive." He looked up through the shattered ceiling. The human fleet still lingered above the clouds, a ring of light circling the planet like a silent guardian. For the first time in his long career, Admiral Voss felt not fear, but humility. That night, the Tyraks broadcast a message across the stars. The voice of Voss echoed through the galaxy. "The humans have returned, not as destroyers, but as the mirror we all feared to face. We surrender not to power, but to truth." Millions listened, some with awe, others with terror. But across the great empires, one truth could no longer be denied. Humanity had not come to conquer the galaxy. They had come to wake it up. The skies of Veltara had never been so quiet. For the first time in 10,000 years, there was no warship above its clouds, no fleet waiting in orbit, no burning horizon. The stars shone clearly now, cold, distant, and unblinking. And yet beneath that calm, the galaxy was forever changed. Weeks had passed since the surrender. The Tyrak's dominion had begun the impossible task of uncovering its own forgotten crimes. Across the planet, massive archives opened, guarded not by soldiers but by scholars. For every lie revealed, for every erased record found, the Dominion faced itself and trembled. In every city square, massive holoscreens played the footage the humans had shared. The old wars, the purges, the exile of an entire species that refused to bow. Citizens watched with silent horror as they realized the myths were not stories, they were scars. Admiral Voss often walked through those crowds in plain clothes. He watched children stare at the sky where the human ships once floated and whisper questions their elders couldn't answer. Why did we attack them? Were they really like us? Will they come back? He had no answers, only a promise that if they ever did return, the Tyrax would face them with open hands. Not raised weapons. Far beyond Veltara, in the deep reaches of uncharted space, the united Terran fleet gathered once more. The vanguard of Sol stood at the center like a heart of light surrounded by 10,000 silver arteries. Inside, Admiral Sloane stood before a massive holographic map, a galaxy alive with new movement. Red markers for hostile empires, green for allies. But a new color now pulsed across the stars. Blue. Spreading slowly planet by planet, each blue mark represented a world that had opened its history. A world that chose truth. Sloane traced one of the glowing roots with her hand. "They're learning," she murmured. Slowly, but they're learning. Her second-in-command, Captain Rian Ko, approached. "The Council wants to know our next target," Sloane smiled faintly. "There is no next target. Not anymore," Ryan frowned. "Then what now?" She turned to face him, eyes calm but sharp. "Now we rebuild the galaxy that forgot itself. We remind them what it means to stand." Meanwhile, deep in the Terran archive vessel Helios, ancient files had begun to wake. For 10,000 years, the humans had carried fragments of their lost home, encrypted data from Earth itself. No one had ever managed to unlock them, until now. The crew watched as the central screen flickered, revealing an old, grainy video. A woman stood on a grassy hill under a blue sky. Her clothes were ancient, her voice soft and clear. "If this message is found, then humanity survived. Remember who we are, builders, dreamers, protectors. Don't let fear make you monsters. If you have come this far, then you already understand. The stars belong to everyone." Silence filled the room. Sloane listened to the words like a heartbeat echoing through time. "Earth speaks," she whispered, "even after all this time." That night, the Vanguard transmitted a new message to every corner of known space. It wasn't a threat or demand. It was the recording of that woman's voice, the last message from Earth. On a dozen alien worlds, beings of every kind stopped what they were doing to listen. The message played in translation across endless frequencies. It carried no anger, only truth. "Once we were feared. Once we were hunted. But we endured and we learned. We are humanity, and we are not your enemy." The galaxy listened, and for the first time in millennia, it believed. On Veltara, Admiral Voss stood at the edge of the spaceport as the final human ship prepared to depart. Commander Mara Juno turned to him, her expression unreadable. "You've changed," she said. Voss smiled faintly. "I've learned that legends are rarely what they seem." Juno extended her hand, a human gesture. After a long moment, Voss took it. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now," she said, "you decide what kind of story the galaxy tells about us." She stepped back, saluted him once, and boarded her ship. The ramp closed, and the craft rose into the air, joining the formation high above. Voss watched until the last glimmer of light vanished into the stars. For a moment, he felt an ache he couldn't explain. Not fear, not grief, but something far more powerful. Hope. As the Terran fleet departed, their final message echoed through the void, carried on every frequency, every channel, every silent wavelength between the stars. We were forgotten. We were erased, but we are still here. And as long as there are stars, humanity will never be a myth again.